Welcome to Can't Not Create. This is my newsletter that shares stories and strategies from artists who got their start later in their career to help kickstart your creative courage wherever it is you want to take that. This newsletter primarily follows my own stories so far, which are very much in the beginning phases, but I'm also looking at a lot of other artists who have been through it, different things different folks are doing, and people might not always fall in the exact same bucket as me, but my goal is to talk to folks who have perspective or experience on some element of what I'm doing. And this brings me to my first ever guest. I have Rachael here today. Rachael is the creative and community connector behind the PDX Dinorama, which in part led to the creation of the Sidewalk Joy Project. And Rachael, I started following you a while back. You regularly offer to help anyone, including myself, who wants to create their own place on this joy map that we'll talk about in a minute, either to provide inspiration, hands-on help, or guidance. You've had so much excitement and enthusiasm. You respond super quickly. It's amazing to know that there's people in the community that just are so engaged and ready to help and connect instantly. I have yet to set up my moment of joy on my sidewalk, but it's definitely on my list. Rachel's also into small things in general. You make tiny pottery, you sell that, but also seem to incorporate it into all of your other little joy projects. I've seen things on Instagram like knitting tiny hats on sculptures or objects around town, fairy doors and telephone poles, tiny park installations, trails of painted fairy footprints. I was like, I have to stop this list because you have so many things happening. You just seem to be generally overflowing with ways to delight people that are just walking by and make their days better. So thank you so much for joining me today, being the guinea pig as I figure out a lot of things, including like how to do interviews and incorporate that into my newsletter. My first question is, do you have any amendments or additions you'd like to make on everything I just talked about?
No, you did a great job, and I just want to say thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So to start off, I know it would be great to get into some of these projects you have going on, but I want to get some background on you. There's a lot of information out there on the Sidewalk Joy project, specific Instagram accounts for PDX Dinorama. I think everyone should check that out. But I want to get a little bit of background. Tell me a little bit about how you got started as an artist and in what capacity, because it seems like you've had a lot of things going on at different points.
Yeah, it's funny. I sometimes when I'm out with my husband and someone says something about me being an artist, I look at him and he goes, "You are an artist." I don't know if it's imposter syndrome or what, but I still sometimes don't even identify as an artist. I think because I'm not necessarily making a career off of it. This is all just like a side passion project for me. But yeah, I feel like my parents really encouraged any kind of artistic tendencies, and I had free reign and lots of materials and time. And I think a lot of it was a lot of boredom where I'm like, I can choose to
Hmm.
do chores or I can choose to take that old box and cut some doors in it and make my own Sculpey dolls and have a whole world with my neighbor across the street. So I think that I have always loved creating, especially like 3D worlds, dioramas, that kind of thing, and was given like the time, space, and boredom to do so as a kid. And so a lot of like where I'm at now with my artistic creations and projects is basically returning to what I would have been thrilled to do, see, or find as a kid. My background in terms of schooling is I got my undergrad degree in neuroscience, and then I went off to grad school and wanted to work more on the human side. So I ended up moving into more of a cog sci situation. And then after receiving my master's, I realized I wasn't in love with publisher parish academia, studying the
Hmm.
same thing in perpetuity. I was just so much more interested in getting people excited about things. I'd fallen into the world of neuroscience because I'd taken a neuroscience class that was so interesting. And I would come back to the dorms and pull out a whiteboard and give like a little impromptu lecture about the cool things I'd learned to my other dorm mates. And so I was really stoked to be a teacher. I thought that would be so fun. And so I went into
Hmm.
academia to pursue that route. And then the more I learned about the world and how you, especially at a collegiate level, you can't just be a teacher as easily. There's a lot of
Right.
expectation, pressure to be a PI as well and do research and that kind of thing. I just realized eventually it wasn't quite for me. And I moved towards museum world and I worked for a few different museums and small
Oh,
nonprofits.
cool.
Working towards my whole thing that I thought I'd be good at would be getting people excited about what I'm excited about, if that makes sense. And I feel like I've fallen into that now with these projects. Like half of what I do is just trying to find ways to get people jazzed about this and see how cool this project is. And it doesn't take much. Like when people hear about the Sidewalk Joy project or come across a spot, there's almost always just a natural excitement and delight for it. So I feel like my job is have to promote these spots and have to help people see that they can participate, whether it's like, visiting them, enjoying them, or maybe even hosting their own.
And you're doing that on like multiple levels because you have the in-person aspect. I'm sure you're out there interacting with people, whether it's in your own sidewalk spots or helping other people. But then you're also engaging with folks online. And I think maybe I've been like a little timid to reach out to people online. Like I'm just always, oh, they have a lot of followers. Like, but I do feel like a lot of artists and what's happening is very one way. It's here's some art someone's doing, and you can appreciate it, you can ask questions, but that's just like the inherent nature of them. But not only have you created something that's by default interactive, you're also like going on that other platform and like adding that dimension of being like, yes, it's interactive in person, but I'm going to invite you in. And you've been like very effective with that. I'm curious, I also saw on your website you mentioned you have a background in marketing. Is that some of the work that you do for the museums and nonprofits?
Yes, exactly. I had no like degree or anything in marketing, but my skills, I had pursued photography most of my life. I was a backup photographer for a wedding company that my dad ran for a while when I was in high school. So I had lots of practice doing photography, just my own fun artistic stuff as well as paid jobs. And then when I wanted to leave grad school before I started working for museums, I decided to pursue photography. And that was great for a couple of years for me, but ultimately I felt lonely. I hadn't found a way to connect with other photographers. And so I felt like I was working with clients all day, which a little bit felt like a new boss each day. And so you really can't have a bad day in a way. Like you show up, and
Right.
I remember a grandparent was sick at one day and I just had to pretend like nothing was going on. And I was really craving that, having coworkers and some stability and a little less pressure each
Hmm.
day to be perfect. Anywho's, all that to say, when I was starting my photography business, I had to learn all the marketing that came with it. If you can't get your name out there, then you can't get any gigs and you can't make any money. So
Right.
I fell backwards into doing my own marketing, including social media and building a website, and all those skills, photography, videography, social media, website, kind of lent itself when I wanted to get into having coworkers in the museum world. The department that fit best was marketing, social media. So that was my niche for a long time.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
I was just going to harken back to something you said too about it's really interesting. It's funny, like having a lot of followers, I really try to respond to everyone. There's occasionally some message that goes to my hidden that I don't end up seeing in time, or sometimes somebody sends me something, especially, oh my gosh, it's awful when someone sends me something heartfelt and I save it for later because I'm like in the middle of picking up my kid from school or
Oh,
something and I
right.
forget and I feel so horrible. But I do try to like connect and respond to everyone because it was only like a year and a half ago that I had 2,000 followers.
Hmm.
And so I still feel like the same. I feel like the person on the other side where I remember being so timid to reach out to people because I felt like I was going to annoy them or bother them or something like that. And it's been really fun to have a lot more people get excited about the movement and join on. And I feel like those people who are following my account are really just excited about Sidewalk Joy. So I'm trying not to ever let it go to my head. But that's part of it too, is just, I love having so many people so excited. So I really try to make it a mission to always respond to comments as best I can. But yeah, when you were talking about
Yeah.
it, just reminded me that I totally know that feeling of being nervous to reach out to somebody, and I hope people don't feel that way with me.
Yes, they have no reason to. You are very friendly. I am curious, what does that look like if you have what, almost 100K followers? What volume of messages do you get?
It totally varies. There's some days I wake up and I've got 20, 25 messages. Right now, that's probably on the high end. And that's like when I've just posted something that people want more information about or that
Mm.
kind of thing. And then there's days where I'm like, I get only a couple messages or something like that. So it definitely varies. I am not at this point with almost 100,000 followers. I'm not getting hundreds of messages a day or anything like that. So it's not totally overwhelming. I imagine if there's continued growth at some point, it might be harder to do that, which makes me sad. But yeah, it's always a balance responding to people. So I try to like go through my messages as best I can in the morning, in the evening once and see what I can respond to. But there's definitely been times where I have to save it for a weekend when I have a little more breathing room and get back to people. But yeah, it's not as intense and wild as I think some people would think. So yeah, don't hesitate if you have questions,
Gotcha.
if you want to get a spot started or that kind of thing. I'm always happy to chat.
Cool. So you have to be a little organized, but it's not like ruining your day.
No, and I don't, yeah, I can't speak to the future. I hope I can continue to respond to people as often as I've been able to. But yeah, so far it's been manageable.
Got it. And so do you have a day job at the moment?
I'm freelancing right now, so it's
Okay.
pretty in the flow. I was doing some contract work for a bit last year that wrapped up in the spring, and I've got two little kids. So when they're off for the summer, they're off for the summer. And the price of daycare for two kids or getting care, it just made more sense for our family that I was going to just do a little bit more pickup jobs as they came and then try to be able to be there when the kids are off school or there's a learning day or they're sick. And so that's been working well for our family at this time when they're so little. Probably in the next few years as they're a little bit older and in school more full time, I'll be looking for something that will be a little bit more steady. But right now I do things like build websites for small businesses. I've taken a couple of photography jobs. I make and sell pottery both online and in a few shops around town. So it's not like it's not the career earnings I've had in the past when I've been working in marketing departments, but it's working well
Hmm.
for our family right now. It's when you are weighing out the cost of sudden childcare on these days off and that kind of thing. So it's a good balance at the moment.
There's a lot of summer camp registrations that opened this morning, and I keep going back between those on my bank account, and I'm like, yikes. So I hear you. But yeah, that's just such a balance of like all these things. And it's interesting because something that I'm really interested, the whole premise of my newsletter is it can be scary to pursue an artistic career early on, but what about some of us who are very artistic, but at some point you reach that boiling point of, okay, I have to do something. That's how I
Mhm.
felt like, and I feel more secure in my career and income. Okay, maybe I can make space for this. You seem like your whole life has just been set up to cater to this creative side that you need, and it's been incorporated throughout. Like maybe if you have your perfect career layout, maybe the balance would be a little different, but you've definitely found a good way to incorporate that all. And it sounds like you have some pieces of that are monetized, but is the Sidewalk Joy thing not monetized at all? That's just pure contributing to the community and for fun.
Oh, yeah, correct. I just heard of a spot that opened up in Ashland this morning, and someone I know who lives there sent me a picture and said, "Oh my gosh, look at there's someone who just made a Sidewalk Joy spot in Ashland." It was outside of a business, so I called the business and I'm explaining about the worldwide Sidewalk Joy map and how I'd love to have them on it, and they're like, "Oh, is this a subscription thing?" And I was like, "Oh, I should
Oh
probably
no.
lead with that." Absolutely not. I was like, "No, this is all for fun for me. This is just like side passion project. I don't make any money off of this." I am trying to write a couple books, and I'm hoping that because I've got a bigger platform with people who share this interest, that if those come to fruition, hopefully that helps people get these out in the world. I'm working on a coffee table book of Portland Sidewalk Joy, and I'm working on a bigger book about the worldwide movement. And so if those come to fruition, I feel like it'll be really neat that I've got this many people who are already interested and have a way to share that. And theoretically, that could be something which would help sustain it. But no, I'm not making money off the Sidewalk Joy project. And actually, funny, it's interesting. You were talking about that boiling point where you're like, I just have to do something creative. I feel like when I was going through undergrad and then grad school, I really wasn't doing much creative. I think my brain was trying to. I was like spending more time making my graphs look lovely and that kind of thing than I
I'm
probably should
familiar.
have. And I think my artistic side wanted to come out, but I wasn't. I was almost suppressing that side because I think there's definitely a societal narrative that looks down on art as a career. And I definitely felt that in my life growing up. And I think, especially maybe in a neuroscience focused program, there's probably a little more of that as well. So I was
Mhm.
almost embarrassed to be doodling so much in my pages and even things like that. So returning to a space where I feel a little bit more free to do whatever project calls my whimsy has been,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm rediscovering myself. And I am mad that I felt the need to suppress it for so long. There's always people who can't pursue art as much as they like because they just straight up don't have the time or energy. And in my case, I felt like there was a little bit of a stigma against it. And I wish I hadn't succumbed to that for a while. So I don't know. I would say like my career path really allowed me a little bit more creativity when I was able to start, yeah, like switching to photography full time or getting to use some creative things in my marketing work and that kind of thing. But prior to that, it was not on track for me to get to express myself in that way.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting because I think that speaks a little bit to what I experienced, but I don't think I've ever thought about it in that way, like that it was the people around me that were ruining it for me, let's say. Because there's some people that I talk to about art or different things, and you just get blank stares. And so I don't know for me that I would always think it was a stigma, but it just seems like some people just so much don't have it on their radar. It's like, why would you have that? I always compare it to sometimes people look at the way I eat and they're like, that looks very sad, as I like get out my freezer meals out of the freezer for my dinner every night or whatever I'm doing. And I'm just like, I don't know, cooking's just not on my radar. I
Yeah.
don't want to deal with that. And I feel like that's something I'm working on just for sustenance reasons. But I'm like so not interested in it. I feel like that's how a lot of people feel about art. Whereas like when I look at like how when I felt good or when I feel bad, like I always feel my best when I'm doing something artistic. And sometimes you do suppress it. And I'm like looking back, I'm like, I was like, I can't like category all of those times as unhappy, but I'm like, I think I always felt like there was something missing or just not satisfied in some way.
Yeah, art is so therapeutic. And I feel like there's so many different ways of art that people sometimes struggle with labeling an artist. And I know a lot of people do when they don't do traditional fine arts. Woodworking is art, and obviously pottery is art. And even I think like curating your home space is art. There's
Hmm.
just any way that you can have a flow state and express yourself and bring some whimsy and color or not, depending on your style, like making something feel like
Right.
an extension of you. It's just so, I don't know, soul restoring.
Yeah, no, I am with you on that. And I realized maybe we shouldn't totally bury the lead. Maybe why don't you talk a little bit about exactly what the Sidewalk Joy project is briefly, and then we can jump into some other questions that kind of stem from there.
Yes, totally. My kids and I were exploring Portland a few years ago, like as tourists and trying to visit all the things that we could do, especially things that were outdoors and free and cheap and everything. And we kept coming across little installations people had put up in their yards or curb gardens and their windows or sides of buildings. And all of these installations like toy swaps or puzzle exchanges or a year-round skeleton, 12-foot skeleton that's dressed up for every holiday, that kind of thing, they all were, I never got to meet most of the owners. It's just people set these up for anyone walking by to just get to enjoy. And it was absolutely fascinated me because there was not anything like that when I was growing up. It was predated little free libraries. Even when you walked
Hmm.
around, it's just like you stay on the sidewalk and at best you can enjoy someone's like nice, lawn decor or something. There was
Right.
nothing, nobody put anything out there just to add some whimsy and joy to people's day in that same way, or at least not that I saw. And this just blew my mind. I felt like I found my people. I loved it. I love that feeling of turning a corner and discovering something. So I made a dino diorama called the Diorama, and shortly after that, the Dino Exchange. And so that we could be in on the fun and get to have one of these spots too and hear people's delight as they come around the corner. And I used my Instagram for that to start sharing about these other spaces around town. Because as soon as I put up my installation, I'd chat with people outside, neighbors who were stopping by, and they would say like, where'd you get this idea? What is this? Your sidewalk
Hmm.
ducks. And they had not heard of these spaces. So I started using my Instagram to just promote the other places like this around town. Someone asked for a map of the spots so that other people could visit them. And I teamed up with Grant Brady, who runs PDX Flag, which is a free little art gallery. And we made the first version of the Sidewalk Joy map. So it's just a map and directory that tracks all these fun, whimsical installations in people's yards around town. And we originally made it for Portland, and I kept hearing from people all over the world that they had made a spot based on seeing ours and seeing the fun that we're having here with this movement in Portland. So I took them up worldwide this past summer and have been adding folks weekly to that ever since.
That is amazing. And it's very cool because, yeah, I guess for somehow in my head, I was like, yeah, Rachel invented sidewalk joy things. And I was like, okay, you made the map. But yeah, you're right. That has been going on in Portland. And you've really been like spearheading or inspiring people to do more. But yeah, I don't remember anything like that when I was a kid either. Are you from Portland?
You know what? We are not military, but we moved every 3 years. So
Okay.
I
So you're
grew up
from
in,
lots of places.
yeah, most of my memories are New Mexico and California. And then I moved to upstate New York as a young adult as well. But yeah, I'd say like mostly West Coast is my upbringing. And yeah, I definitely am like, I never want to be seen as like the first person with the Sidewalk Joy spot. I do give Grant and I credit for, we coined the term Sidewalk Joy. And then I know that about 50 more spots in Portland were inspired by seeing the map. I'm not saying they were inspired by my Dinorama or Grant's free little art gallery, but they heard about the map, saw the project, and were inspired by that whole thing. And I think what was really cool about the map was we don't put anyone on the map without connecting with the owner first. We explain the project,
Hmm.
ask if they're interested, make sure that they're comfortable with it. So there's still quite a few spots that we know of that are not on the map. Someone who doesn't want to advertise it far and wide and wants it to remain a little neighborhood secret, and that's totally fine. So anyway, all that to say, because we've gotten to know everyone and we do twice a year gatherings, we have built such a beautiful community. So if there's ever a time when the spot is running a little bit low or needs a little TLC or that kind of thing, we have this whole beautiful community. So while there have been spots all, across everywhere, the world and the US and everything already, there's, free little art galleries and fiber exchanges and that kind of thing that have long predated us making the map. I think what I'm trying to bring is that like connecting us all as a big community, and helping to spread the word about the project. So yeah, all that to say, I would love to encourage that connecting on this bigger community scale. And I think that does a lot for the movement.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And yeah, sometimes I get black and white thinking, and I'm like, Rachel, join map
Oh
versus
gosh,
ever.
no,
Yeah. But no, that's
girl,
not the
if
way
you're
you're
not in this
presenting
world, yeah,
yourself.
yeah. No, I totally get it. I think it's totally understandable. I'm talking about this absolutely nonstop and stuff like that. I just love giving credit where credit's due. Sidewalk Ducks is, I think, turning 13 or 14 years old this year. Do you know the origin
Wow.
story of Sidewalk Ducks?
No.
Okay, so there's these parents had a party for their kiddo and they had extra party favor rubber ducks. So they put them outside just as a take one gift for the community. And Portland being Portland, they kept noticing that the ducks were actually just swapped. So the ducks they put
Oh.
out would go away, but a new one would come back in its place. And so it turned into this unofficial swap. And they had no anything, no sign, no social media, no nothing. It just on their
Hmm.
front steps, ducks came and went for years and years. They even had to move to New York for a while because one of them was pursuing a graduate degree and they had the long-term friends staying in their house. And when they got back, the exchange was still going on. And so it was only a few years ago that they got a sign and then a social media for it. It's just Portlanders doing Portlander things and just deciding that this stoop is forevermore going to be where you swap ducks is so funny to me.
Yeah, it's really funny because I actually wrote about this in one of my recent newsletters because I was trying to think back on my whole life art experience and different things that have influenced or where I got informal training. And I was talking about this one art teacher I had in college. I took just a general art class, I think. I don't think it was specific to drawing, but the teacher was so quirky. This was in Walla, Washington, so not Portland. This was also what, like 2006 or something, 2005. And she took us to her studio one time and she was showing us what she does. She was a very talented illustrator and could make these amazing drawings, but she spent most of the time talking to us about how she would get those little toy mice that have different outfits and stuff that little kids play with. She would get those and make little scenes and leave them in the forest, like on trails. But there's pre-social media and everything. So like, what are you doing that for? She was like, I just really like setting them up and then imagining people coming across them and finding them and wondering what they would think. And I think for me, it was a very split between that is so cool. And also that's an odd thing to be like spending so much time on because I was like 19 and probably very judgmental, but also very intrigued because there was some kind of this childlike quality to you're just setting stuff up in the woods and this is how you're spending, it seems like a decent amount of your time. But it's that one way artist interaction, which you don't get a lot. It's just artists putting stuff out in the world and then like never seeing what anyone thinks about it, just enjoying the idea of it. So this kind of reminds me of that. But there's like that level of interaction and like community. And I love it because I've just decided I'd be so much happier if I was doing art, but I just get really in my head and about like literally everything I'm doing. But I'm like, what am I like contributing to the world? Does the world need like another random painting that I felt like making? And part of me is I just don't really care. I think a lot of what we do is not necessarily making a huge impact on the big picture, and that's fine. We're just trying to get through the day. But I love the idea of it actually being a tool as a way to connect, and the outcome almost doesn't matter. It's more just can we connect and have some time doing something that we enjoy and connecting them that way. Was that ever an intent? Is that like the underlying ethos that started it, or was that more like something that was like a pleasant surprise that has grown in that way?
I feel like that's a big question that made me think of a thousand answers. But just in terms of the connecting with the community part of it, like when I made my spot, I would just sit as close to the window as I could and wait for people to come by whenever I was able to. I just view it as like when someone stops and their face turns from just they looked like they were bored or just staring at the sidewalk or something, and they had this moment of like, ooh, what's this? I know I found like my people. And
Hmm.
I usually would make an excuse to come outside. Oh, I need to just double check this or whatever.
Yeah.
And if the person was so inclined, we could strike up a conversation. I try not to put people on the spot, but I have always loved like learning more about people, knowing people in my community. I think that's just like the greatest thing. This total side story, but when we were looking for a house at one point, we found our dream house in what I thought was our dream neighborhood. It was just like glorious. It was near a coffee shop we loved. It was beautiful. All the houses were lovely. And I don't know, this house that we were interested in needed a lot of work. It was the only one in our price range. But we spent about 45 minutes out on the sidewalk, kind of like hoping to run into a neighbor and never saw anyone. So I told my husband, I can't live there. I can't do it. I need that on a gorgeous spring weekend day like this. If there's not people outside, it's not my neighborhood. I love connecting with people. So yeah, making this project, I really had hoped to meet more people, connect with people, brighten folks' day. That was absolutely part of it. When I'm designing, I have a couple different dioramas and a couple different exchanges in my yard at this point. One of them is called Small Scenes, and I trade it out once a month, or I try to. When I'm designing it, I'd always be happy butterflies, thinking somebody's going to be so stoked to see this or surprised to see this, that kind of thing. Absolutely a motivator of my art. Speaking to whether the world needs another artist, I think in this age where you can put out a XYZ video and reach a million people if it just happens to be the right secret sauce, there's a
Hmm.
lot of pressure for the things we do to have. And I think back about how people lived a couple hundred years ago and what was the meaning of their life, because a lot of people forgot into history and they worked hard and were kind maybe or something, and we'll never know anything about them really. And now we have this pressure to like really be something, to change the world, to
Yeah.
make a huge difference, to inspire people. And I think a lot of that is really well motivated, but I also, at the end of the day, I my personal belief and the reason I feel like I'm here is to connect with my community, to strengthen my community, to bring some joy and happiness to my community. I think everyone's got their strengths. And I think so many of those, we need people who are that voice of reason, who can inspire us and get us activated and move towards our values and all that kind of thing. And I feel like there's people who are just so great at writing important pieces and that kind of thing. And I feel like for me, my space is creating art that I hope can bring people together or lighten their day a little bit or help give them a little bit of energy. So I don't know. Does the world need any more of anything? Who's to say? We've got a lot of artists, we've got a lot of thinkers, we have a lot of everything. I think if you're focusing on doing something that improves your life, yeah, and if as a bonus of maybe beautifying your world and bringing some joy to someone else, I never think that's a waste.
Yeah, I love that. That's helpful. I'm gonna save that in the anxiety bank of things I decide to dwell on for no reason. Yeah, I know, because you know what I said? I was like, I just decided not to care about it because that's all that they, for me, it is something that I still get internally stressed on that I wish I could just not care about. But I think a lot of us have this deep seated, or at least back of the mind thing of I should be helping, I should be contributing in some way. And there's so many different things going on that cause so much stress, and you're like grasping for ways to help and what impact you can make. So then when you like just go do this personal project, you're like, if it's like something that you're really pursuing in your life, you're like, are these things connecting? Is what I'm doing connecting with like the problems and the needs I see? And I think Rachel and I talked a little bit before we hit record, and we're talking about how big of an impact connecting and the community piece can have in the midst of all the stressful dynamics going on, personal life, work, the entire world. I guess what we talk a lot about, like how great this art is for connecting in community. Do you have more specific thoughts on like why that's important and how it helps?
Yeah, we were talking a bit about maybe some of the ways that our country has obviously at a point where we're pretty divisive at this point. But I feel like strengthening our communities is like one of the what can we do to improve our world right now? It's like you can take some of these measures, connect with your community, build some community, that kind of thing. And I feel like when I see those lists of what can we do right now, I'm like latching onto the community part. I would love to help bring people together, provide that third space where people can gather and maybe have a lighter mood and connect with their neighbors and see each other again. Because a lot of our time is spent on screens or gosh, like especially now, just like consuming news. And I feel like there's so much value in like getting to know your neighbors and reconnecting with your community. And that's like a great way to find out if there's a particular need where you can serve. I don't think my little whimsical installations are healing the world necessarily. I think there's lots of things that I can and will be doing to fulfill the part of me that wants to be adding that kind of value and that kind of activism. But I view what I do and what I share as we have a lot of doom and gloom going right now. We have a lot of doom and gloom going around right now. And I would love to help to bring some whimsy and brevity to the situation while also bringing people together and connecting.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think it really speaks to like when people can connect in one way, they figure out it doesn't matter as much if they don't agree on all the other ways, and it can help us find that common ground. I also just generally think that no one is ever fighting when they're doing art projects. If everyone just spent their time doing art projects, there would just be less time to do all this other stuff. Sometimes in
Right.
my weird daydreams, I'm like, what if like all of the political leaders of the world had to sort everything out to collaborative art projects? Just putting that out there.
Yeah. No, I think that's part of it. It's really hard to hold faith in your heart while you're doing art. It can be done, but I think it's more challenging. And I feel when you get to know your neighbors, it can help us all see the humanity in each other. And I feel like there's a lot of attempts of erasure of certain folks in our community. And I feel like getting to see their perspectives and both getting to meet and chat with them and see their art is just so valuable.
Yeah, I disagree 100%. What ideas do you have in the works about future community driven projects? Is it leaning more into the sidewalk joy? Do you have other things? I'm curious about if time and money weren't restrictions, what do you think would be cool?
One of the hopes I had for this year was to partner with a school or a couple schools to bring Sidewalk Joy to that environment. And I actually just had that dream come true because I had a school near me
Oh,
reach out and
amazing.
ask if I wanted to partner on some stuff. So I'm starting actually this month getting to go in and meet with the kids and chat with them about what their vision would be and do what I can to bring that vision to fruition. And I feel like the reason that appeals to me so much is because as a kid, I don't feel like very often I felt like I had any impact on the world around me. Like
Hmm.
we moved through the world, and I'm not talking about like the countertop is high at the bank or anything like that. I'm talking about I felt like everything was being built or signs were put up or whatever. It's just all nothing. Like I always just was so curious, like who's making the signs, who's making the street lights, who decides this, who makes this, why is this designed this way? And I'll never
Yes.
know. It felt so mysterious. And the reason that even came into my head at 5 years old is because we were redoing a section of the wall. I think we had a wall damaged of our kindergarten, and they repaired it partly with cement that they let all the kids bring in something special to attach in, like a marble or a
Oh,
little toy
cool.
car or something like that. And they made a tiny little door that would lead out to this playground. So the kids could all stream out through this tiny door, and the adults would have to use the big door off to the side. And I never
Hmm.
felt like there was a space that represented me that I had any part in building or designing before. And it just blew my mind. And so the thought of helping this next generation get to actually impact their environment, create a space that other people, including adults in the community, that will come and interact with, that is their vision and they can help create it and they understand some of the inner workings behind that. I just feel like that's so valuable. It's so valuable to tell this next generation that they got to say what their community can look like and that their dreams are big enough to make into a permanent whatever installation that's in the community. Like that to me is so valuable. I'm also hoping to work with a couple organizations that would help maybe bring Sidewalk Joy to neighborhoods that don't have anything like that right now. Maybe because
Hmm.
they are lacking resources for it or things like that. I think Sidewalk Joy installations are really placemaking. And I often hear, oh, we couldn't have that here get destroyed. I hear that so often. And I think there's truth to that in some areas. Like I'm never going to say, yeah, build it and nothing will happen to it. That's always a
Right.
possibility. But I will say a lot of people would have said that about Portland, especially people who
Hmm.
don't live in Portland looking in would be like, oh my
Right.
God, I would never work in Portland and just get destroyed. And I don't know. I think that can change a little bit the feel and the vibe of the neighborhood. If everyone comes together and does like a really cool street mural together and then has some installations and people are like out and about more and milling and visiting a neighborhood, like that can change some of that placemaking feel and vibe. So yeah, sorry, long answer to your question. I'm really hoping to partner with some organizations that are hoping to bring Sidewalk Joy to neighborhoods that wouldn't normally have the resources for something like this. I'm really hoping to work with at least a couple of schools this year to help kids get to see their vision come to life. And then I have this dream to bring some kind of Sidewalk Joy to an elderly care center where folks
Oh,
like
I like that.
maybe, yeah, I just feel like where they're maybe have interest in whatever, like crafts and sharing and connecting, and it would be a draw for people who are visiting them as well, and that kind of thing. Those are just a couple of the things I'm hoping
Oh,
to
I love
have
it.
happen.
You have so many
Yeah.
ideas. This like makes me like have a million ideas. I'm like, we'll do all these other things too. The one that comes to mind is if you, I've grown up doing a lot of running and stuff, and I don't know if organizations like Girls on the Run and things like that, but it could be cool to have some kind of little mini maps that have routes that kids can do. I don't know if there's rules about like where they can run, but give them little sidewalk joy running routes or things like that. There's you could do anything with that.
I think we had 3 run clubs last year, or maybe it was 2 run clubs, but 3 runs total or something like that went to Sidewalk Joy spots. So you reach out to us. So
Oh, that's
which ones are
awesome.
close together? And do you feel like maybe you're in a neighborhood with less intense roads to cross and that kind of thing? So Grant and I
Mhm.
helped them develop a couple of routes for that. And then there were a few Pedalpalooza rides as well. So for anyone who doesn't know, that's just like an enormous bike month celebration here in Portland where there's all sorts of fun and themed bike rides. But yeah, I think that originally the suggestion for the map came from one of the owners of a Sidewalk Joy installation named Dan. I hope I don't butcher his last name. It's Pecia, maybe. He does pottery and has a spot where he puts out his pottery for the community.
Oh,
And
cool.
he suggested the map. He was like, somebody should make a map of these spots. So it's like a biking
Uh-huh.
map. It originally was proposed as a biking map, which I think is so cool.
Yeah, no, it's like they just go so hand in hand. And like anything, I think I'm like you, I have young kids, and I think a lot about like during COVID when we were doing things, and there was a lot of nature walks. Some times of year lent themselves to that activity more than others. And so it would be like, how many different colors of pine cones can we find? And yeah, we have a few of the book, the little library exchanges, and those are great. Those make things exciting. But yeah, it would be so fun to have more of that.
Came across some calico critters set up in the forest when you're on these walks.
I know, just
That's, I mean, that's how
just
this
looking there.
started for me. Is it was just like, yeah, I was exploring with my kids. I was like trying to do something outdoors, socially distant, free. And every time we'd find a spot like this, that was the longest attention span my kids would have. And I would just be like, thank you, bless this person who made
Now
this,
I
who
can
made this. I'm like,
75
this is
seconds.
great. Exactly. I can like sip my coffee for once, have a breather. My kids are so stoked on finding some cars to trade.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, so a few more questions. I'm curious, something that I always struggle with is I have all these ideas, like all these things I want to do, but just tactics. I have very limited energy at the end of the day. I am not always very organized. And I think what you referenced before about, I truly think that to be a successful artist, you have to really have the business side down if you want to monetize it or just make it more widespread and shared like you are, which is why I'm doing it backwards. I'll set up all the marketing, I'll make a newsletter and then become an artist, see how that goes as my experiment. But what, I guess, speak to that a little bit. Like, how do you make this all come together? Is this something that you have to really think out and plan to keep all these plates spinning, or is this just you doing what you feel compelled to do naturally?
You know, funny to ask this. I'm probably the worst person to ask for a lot of these things because I have ADHD. And so I've learned a lot about myself in the last couple of years after finding this out. But one of the things that's been most helpful to know, and the reason that I struggled a lot with organization and getting things done and procrastinating and always being late before, I'm sure there's 3 P's. I'm trying to remember what they all stand for. Pressure is one of them. When you feel pressure, you'll get something done if it's enough
Hmm.
pressure. There's one that's a P that means routine. I can't remember what the actual word is, but if you do something every day, you can get it done. And the other P is pleasure. Something's fun, you'll
Hmm.
get it done. And if it's not any of those things, it's like a bill that's due in a couple weeks, you're not going to pay it. So if you're someone who's built the way I am, I feel like it's really served me well in terms of artistic projects because when I get going, I feel like I'm a superhuman, especially having 2 young kids. When I have my moment to myself, I make use of that time like never before. I sometimes feel like if
Yes.
I could have gifted my pre-kid self the efficiency that I have now, I would have just dominated the world before, but such it is.
Like,
So
what
yeah,
was I
I feel
doing when I
like
was like 22 with my
I know.
time?
Oh my gosh. I can't even understand how I filled my time. But yeah, so I think for me, like the artistic side, like the ebbs and flows, which is like a bummer to be like, oh, I'm on a down point. I don't have as
Mm.
many ideas or I'm not motivated to do them. But often I feel like doing the artistic things for me comes a little easier as long as I'm following that pleasure path, like which one is most appealing. If I'm into it, then it comes easily to me. But sometimes that gets me into trouble. Like I had this experience last week, even where there were 5 separate people who reached out because I just had announced like I made these 7 mug exchanges to give away. And someone reached out and said, "Oh, cool. Like I see one of the colors is the one I had talked to you about you were making for me. Is that one for me?" And I was like, "Oh my God, I totally forgot I promised you one. I will make you a different one." And then someone else was like, "Hey, you had promised to help me make this other type of exchange. When were you thinking that's happening? I can see you building these other things." Like they didn't say it like that. But it's like you're producing things like, when is mine going to happen? And it was the person, if they recognize themselves in this, they were like the sweetest person ever. They did not come across as anything bad. It was just like they were wondering like, when are we going to work on that? And yeah, that happened like basically 5 times. Somebody reached out and was like, "What about this project? What about this? When is this happening?" And I was like, "Oh my God." Like I thought I had been organized, and I am just absolutely not. I am dropping the proverbial plates left and center. And so then the reason that those 5 projects are getting done is because I'm feeling all that pressure to get those done. So they're going to get done. And it's just a little bit understanding the way I work and flow has been helpful for me taking the next step forward. But I do feel like I'm floundering. I have all these like big grand ideas of organization and like strategy for Sidewalk Joy, and taking those steps is really painful. There's a lot of energy it takes to get something like that started for me. So the long answer is I'm figuring out, but you putting out the newsletter first and becoming an artist, quote unquote, second, I don't think is a bad strategy, because I think that by putting out a newsletter and having people interested and having some kind of regular schedule, you are adding the pressure to yourself that
That's the
maybe
plan.
if you're anything like me, that would actually help you create. If you tell people you're going to do something and they're watching and listening, then that might give you some of that oomph to get going on that artistic practice.
Yeah, no, that's everything you said is just so comforting because I'm like, maybe I have ADHD.
It's been really helpful. And I feel like there's a lot of my friend who has ADHD would just feel free to watch the videos on Instagram and TikTok with all the strategies and them telling you like who you are, what you do, and how ADHD works, but take it all with a grain of salt, because so little of those are actually backed up by anything. And that's been really helpful. I've really tried to watch anytime a video is served to me about functional tactics with ADHD. I just see which one appeals to me, take it with a grain of salt and try it out and see if it works, and don't beat myself up if it doesn't. But yeah, it's been really helpful to start to understand a little bit more of what makes me get something done. For example, knowing that for me, the very hardest part about a project that isn't necessarily due immediately or something I'm really excited about is just that actual first step. And so if I had something I needed to build, but I wasn't excited about, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to go out to the garage and I'm just going to sweep up the sawdust. That's all I'm doing in the garage. I'm not starting the project. I'm just going to sweep up the sawdust because it's getting out of hand. Once I was out there, I was like, since I'm here, maybe I'll just do the outline drawing of the thing I need to do, put it on the wood, and then when I'm ready, I can cut it. And then I'm like, I don't know. Once I've got the outline on it, like maybe I'll just cut it and I'll feel good. And
Like
so it's just
4
like
a.m. and you're like,
I totally trick myself into starting something by promising that all I need to do is like the very like lowest hanging, easiest first step task, and that really helps me a lot. And I'm like really grateful to have found some strategies like that help me move forward on things that aren't super fun or super pressing.
yeah, no, I really like that because that is exactly my issue. It's crazy. I feel like the amount of energy you can expend on something, but like how much my body doesn't want to do that first step. I'm like, I have these huge plans, but I would have to stand up in order to start that. And
God,
that's not
don't even
happening
like
right now.
the bedtime routine at night is so painful for me. I start like picking on my husband in a playful way, but he stopped stalling. I can tell that you just don't want to go wash your face. Just go do it. You'll get it over with. Because I'm just like poking at him and being annoying and stuff. And he knows me now. He knows that it's just like me not
Yeah.
wanting to get out of bed.
Yeah. So that resonates deeply. Okay. We talked about a lot of things. Is there anything that we didn't chat about that has come up in your mind as we've been talking or that you'd like to share?
I just hope that something I'd like to emphasize for anyone who's thinking about their art practice, and whether existent or non existent as it is that I think a lot of people have a tendency towards perfectionism. I wouldn't even have said that had a tendency towards perfectionism, because nothing I do is perfect by a long shot. But I know that sometimes I have a tendency to want to keep fiddling with it. I don't even think of myself as being a perfectionist because I have never once produced something perfect. But yeah, I would find myself stalling. And so I would just say, get something out there and you can always iterate. For example, when I made the diorama, I didn't put any kind of plexiglass on the front. I didn't think about that till
Mm.
after. So I had to modify that to protect it from the weather, or like a toddler who wants to take one of the dinos home, which I
Right.
completely understand. I had to do a weird modification to get plexiglass on there. And then the first dino exchange, I subbed out after 3 months because it wasn't very weatherproof. But the fact that I put it out there, even when I originally put out the Dino Exchange, it has 3 compartments, and one of them just said under construction. That was such
Yeah.
a fire under my butt to get it done, because once I put it out there, people were really excited about it. And it was embarrassing for me that one whole like diorama section of it wasn't done. I am so glad that I put out that first iteration of it, because it's so much easier to iterate on something than it is to sometimes get something all the way to fruition. So nobody who walked by the Dino Exchange that I know of was like, this is cool, but like, I can't believe that they didn't finish the last compartment. This much enjoyment for me. And I'm like, I think most people just were so stoked on it and excited to see what was coming next. And if I had waited, I don't know how many more months it would have been until I put it out there.
Yeah. Oh, that is such a good message. It reminds me of my last term. I took all these art classes last year at PCC. And in my last term, I took a human figure drawing class. And the teacher during the critique said, nobody is allowed to talk about their own art. Put your art up and other people will talk about it. Because she was like, every time people talk about their own art, all they do is talk about what they wish they had done or what they had planned to do. And no one else even knows. They're
Yeah.
just looking at a cool piece of art and you're there crapping all over it. We're not
Yeah.
doing that. And that's such in line with what you're saying. It's also validating with my approach here with my newsletter and these interviews. Very good full circle on you joining me for my first interview. Yeah, there's a lot of elements I'm not scared of. I'm not scared to reach out to people. I'm not scared to do the interview. Honestly, I'm just like get nervous about leading up to hitting record and be like, am I doing this right?
Yeah.
And then editing it after the fact. I've learned so that I can make a lot of videos that I then never do anything with. But now I have the pressure of I have announced this to people. I took up your time and we're going to get this out in a week or so. And I'm so excited for people to hear about what you've done. Where can everyone find you and what should they be following?
Yeah, I'm on most social media. Yes, I was trending towards Instagram because I'm most active on there. I'm PDX Dinorama on everything: TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Blue Sky. I have a website, which is pdxdinorama.com. But if you do sidewalkjoy.com, it'll take you there as well. And then to make things confusing, we also have PDX Sidewalk Joy, which is the Portland Sidewalk Joy focused map. They're just separate because the worldwide project is like my own baby that I'm taking on. The Portland one is more focused specifically on highlighting spaces that are really amazing here in Portland specifically, but there's a lot of overlap between them. The websites reference each other and point to each other and everything like that because it's all related. But yeah, so I'd say either sidewalkjoy.com or find me on any social media as PDX Dinorama.
Perfect. And yeah, she's so helpful if you're thinking about setting one up. I'm going to be talking to you soon about setting my own up. More pressure to follow through because I really want it. So I'm like,
I can't wait. I can't wait to see what you create.
I mean, thank you so much for joining me today, Rachael.
Absolutely. I am hoping to hold at least one workshop this spring, I should add, for someone who maybe wants a XYZ type of exchange but doesn't consider themselves a builder. Same as being artist. Sometimes I'm like, am I a builder? But I'm like, I don't know, I get it done. So
you are now.
If you're okay with us all making something that is not like most polished thing ever in the world, but is going to be cool and you can get out in your community, I think that would be a good fit for folks. So stay tuned for that. That's hopefully going to be a mid to late spring thing with maybe a few iterations.
That's awesome. Okay, good to know. All right, thank you so much, Rachael.
Of course.